Role-playing games have methods. They're tools that we use to reach our goals. But for a host of reasons, we can get really attached to the tools themselves. In fact, we can get so entrenched that adherence to those specific tools becomes as dogmatic as a religious sect, forgetting that they're supposed to just be a means to an end. Months ago, I did an episode on this topic of slaying our sacred cows, and today's episode concerns killing quite a fat one. But first, it's necessary to reiterate that role players are often not on the same page about what they want. Again, role playing games are chimeras, the melding together of older constituent parts like wargaming and make believe or novel writing. So, as I discussed in my recent Pineapple on Pizza episode, what one group calls a role playing game might be slightly or even largely different from another group. And we can't know that from just the term role playing game. So, we have to elaborate on what our games are. So, to be clear about how I'm defining it, the goal of the game is for players to take on the role of these fictitious characters, to take the role seriously, behaving as they would with legitimate free will in a well developed secondary world or setting. This is the unique gift of role playing games, which none of the constituent activities of this chimera can do as well as role playing games. So keep that specific picture in mind as I explain why a massive methodological shift can seriously help us reach this goal. Gamers should always ask, what maximizes the experience we want in role-playing games? There are many answers of value. The overarching one I wish to focus on is what I call the player-to-character unity of perspective. I've discussed it in the past, but briefly, this means that we should do everything we can to match the player's mindsets, beliefs, information, and perception with their characters. For that unity strengthens their connection with their characters. And so, finally, to today's topic, the power of rules opacity. In the Matrix, those who are outside of it see everything in the Matrix program as it truly was on their screens as numbers and algorithms, which they learn to interpret. They had a meta point of view, if you will. But when they enter the Matrix, the complete illusion of physicality is generated for them. They were in that virtual world, becoming as real to them as the real world was. This is the ideal experience for players in a role-playing game, for the secondary world to feel real. And here's where we must look at our methods regarding mechanics. Rules and mechanics serve as the algorithms and numbers in the matrix of our gaming worlds. But when we're viewing those meta components, we, like the characters in the movie, are not in the matrix, aside from Superman Neo at the end, of course. The only way for them to see the meta is to be outside of it, disconnected from it. And this is what happens in our gaming sessions. The players may be talking in character, making plans, exchanging descriptions, and so forth, and then someone attempts some action requiring the use of mechanics. What do? They look at a chart or they reference some number, roll dice, and see a mechanics outcome. With this method, they have, even if it was just for a moment, disconnected from the actual role playing. They stepped out of the flow of being in character, leaping from the secondary world and landing in the meta realm as they look at the math governing reality. This, probably as an accident of history more than anything else, became the dominant method of playing in the 1970s, which was then naturally passed down to subsequent generations of gamers. The problem with this conventional method is that the players are constantly toggling between being in the secondary world as their characters and then out of it as if they're playing some kind of board game, consulting elements of the meta. They had been truly role playing their characters. They were talking in character, thinking the way that their characters should, and exploring the other world as if it were real. But then their minds were yanked away into a sterile realm of numbers and algorithms. This wouldn't be a big deal if it were rare, but it's certainly not. Perhaps hundreds of times per most sessions, the players are having to do some kind of mechanics consultation or calculation, some reference to a skill or a spell or a rule. Each time that they do this, they are out of the role playing mindset and out of the gaming world. Psychologists have a term, switch costs. Any activity that we're in takes time to deepen and strengthen our concentration. When forced to do a different task, we lose more than simply the time it took to do that other thing. This is the mental tax we pay each time that we're distracted. The player's switching cost for these disparate mental tasks diminishes the goal we're after, strong immersion into the other worlds as these other characters, role playing. But the solution to this problem is not to get rid of mechanics. Game rules and mechanics are the foundation of cause and effect. They serve as a solid objective basis for adjudications and are vital for the world to function. The methodological change we need was first signaled 50 years ago by a gamer named Sandy Eisen, what we refer to as rules opacity. The players not looking at rules, leaving all mechanics solely as the job of the GM. Eisen's move was to prevent the players from ever knowing the rules at all. While I guess that would work, I think that specific restriction might go too far for what's probably unwanted and unneeded, not to mention unviable in the 21st century. It's unwanted unless you really are happy being the only GM in your group forever. But perhaps concealing all of the mechanics might be unnecessary. It's sufficient for the players that they view and interact with no mechanics while playing. That is, they may come to understand how the melee mechanics work, but they look at no numbers or charts or dice during the game. The player's focus can be 100% on role playing. That is, imagination, descriptions, immersing themselves in the secondary world as they walk through, and so forth. In every area of the game, the players are only told what their characters would believe. They have no access to the meta information, not their actual stats or skill percentages, and so on. If they're a spellcaster, they only know what their characters would know about magic. They never get to see those rules, never bother with the logistics of spells. In a melee, you know what your character knows. You are stabbing, hacking, parrying, falling, and bleeding. You don't see numbers or charts or algorithms. You see bruises and blood. You feel the exultation of victory and the horror of possible defeat. Greater mystery is preserved with this. From novels and movies, we all know when facing a vampire that it's time to pull out our holy symbols and wooden stakes. There's a werewolf in the forest. Everyone get your silver weapons. The fights themselves may still be fun, as with any good board game, but the mystery gets stolen from the players. Consider the difference between the players knowing the details of an obur, a revolting vampiric creature, because they read about it in the rule book, versus their characters encountering this strange, disgusting horror, having no idea what they're facing. Under standard styles, many players will have inevitably memorized some or all of this creature's skills and powers and weaknesses. But within the rules opacity method, this reeking, dung flinging abomination for which they have no name or classification is intriguing and frightening in addition to its skills or powers because of the mystery surrounding it. The players don't have to pretend that they're ignorant about it because they truly don't know what it is or what it's capable of doing. Thus, a richer level of enjoyment is generated beyond wargaming components. Players can now have the opportunity to legitimately discover the strengths, strangeness, and perhaps even vulnerabilities of this undead horror. And this journey adds a whole new layer of satisfaction. Each encounter is like seeing a movie for the first time. This ignorance truly is bliss. Players are, with this method, completely free from switching costs. They're no longer bouncing back and forth like a tennis ball between imagination and algorithm. The GM handles all of this meta information, all the numbers and charts, relaying only real life descriptions to the players. This, I'm convinced, is a powerful tool towards the goal of otherworld immersion that so many gamers long for but don't truly get. It's the peak of that mental unification for the players. Their minds are free to focus on nothing but being their characters, exploring the secondary world, making choices that affect everything therein. But as I said, slaying our sacred cows is hard, especially for those, myself included, who played for decades using the conventional juggling act. And perhaps upon consideration, your group doesn't genuinely care about this deep immersion into your characters or the secondary world. Perhaps a focus on the wargaming and board gaming components of your chimera are the real point of your game. If so, I simply believe that calling it role playing misses the mark. Hopefully, someday, maybe by the 25th century, we'll have a role playing lexicon that we can all agree on. In any case, for those who really do want to be maximally immersed in the other worlds, in character, as character, etc., Rules Opacity may be the single most powerfully encompassing method we have. I'll quickly address three of the most common objections to full opacity. One, the players won't know exactly how to do things. That is, they won't know the precise chances, the exact risks that their characters are taking. This is true, and it's not a bug, it's a feature. Remember our goal. We want the players to be unified with their characters. And so the character's evaluation of a challenge is identical to ours in real life. We never have exacting percentages. You have a good idea of how well you can do things. You may be a daily runner or a sprinter, or you may be so sedentary that running to your mailbox would have you heaving for breath. How well can you climb? Chop wood. We have no Archimedean point of view to stand and look down on reality. If you're in a 100-yard dash race with someone, all you know is how skilled you think you are and how skilled you think your opponents are. You do your best, hoping you'll win. Are you climbing a sheer cliff? The better of a climber you are, the better your chances of success, and the faster you'll get to the top, and the better you are at assessing your chances. Remember the Terminator movies when they let us see from his point of view? Every person, building, and machine was analyzed, and a readout of numerous stats appeared on the screen. Life is not like that for us. We may be confident about our conclusions. We may know that we can easily do this or that, or know that a particular thing is impossible for us. But these are human judgments from within our own skins. We're not escaping this plane of reality, viewing it from the Archimedean perch of the meta. Players are united with their characters in the finite perspectives. As they try to do things, they're left with their educated guesses. A second objection is this puts too heavy a burden on the GMs. This depends on the system in use. Some of the crunchier systems, especially if your group has numerous players, might become a real chore for the GMs. The fix is to use a set of rules which avoids a lot of this crunch, but which still helps emulate realism. There are several such systems out there. My own system has been crafted so that groups can use full opacity. to distill the most important elements down to quick, straightforward resolutions, relying on the Pareto principle, aka the 80-20 rule, which briefly is to say that a lot of the crunchier mechanics don't help generate the illusion of realism as much as the designers think that it would. And we can avoid a lot of what I call detailism. A third objection I hear is a mixture of the misguided and the downright pathetic. The GM will just cheat if you allow him to handle all the mechanics. This really has to be the saddest of objections I've heard. First of all, unless your group plays in a highly unconventional style where he keeps no secrets whatsoever, your GM can cheat in numerous ways as things stand. Even if every roll is made in the open, and even if every enemy's hit points are made transparent, the GM is responsible for the world, and so has always been able to cheat for or against the players, regardless of opacity. But this is even more sad because it's saying that your GM, who most of the time is actually a friend, not just someone you role play with, is unethical and is a liar and is so morally weak that, given the chance, will lie and cheat. If that's the case, why are you gaming together? And more importantly, you need to choose better friends. Okay, so a couple of important points to close on. One, this isn't just theoretical musing. Through the decades, my group always had a good deal of mystery and some rules opacity going on. I increased it some through the years, but only in the past 3 years did I try the complete opacity method. The effects on my players was pronounced. Their in-character, in-world immersion was intensified. A fuller three-dimensionality was generated for them. Battles especially changed for them, becoming more flesh and blood than ever. The meta elements being hidden, their imaginations were free to focus on nothing but what their characters were experiencing. Their fear of a PC's death became more intense, for they had no mechanics to rely on. They only saw blood and gore. So, across the board, from experience, I can attest to the efficacy of this complete opacity. And this doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition. If your group isn't willing to go completely opaque, then just try some of it. The fewer the toggling between the meta and the make believe, the less of a switching cost the players have to pay. But at the same time, why not at least experiment with this full opacity, even just one player at the table? When I look back, I can see that the younger me probably would not have been willing to try it. I think I was too married to my gaming habits, which meant that I, as a player, had to be looking at mechanics and had to be rolling my dice. But once I clarified what I truly want in a role playing game, I can see that I don't need anything from a board gaming or wargaming experience. I want to maximize role playing, and this complete opacity method is a powerful aid.